You could never predict what the next day would be like. For Alexei, every new dawn was a challenge. He lived alone in an old house on the outskirts of the city, worked in an abandoned scientific laboratory where he was almost alone. The research that was conducted there had long been abandoned, but Alexei continued to conduct experiments related to human consciousness and memory. It was his passion, and he could not stop, even when he began to notice strange changes in his own consciousness. One morning, Alexei woke up with a feeling that something was wrong. The world around him seemed alien, unreal. Ordinary things, such as the sound of footsteps on the floor or the rustle of the wind outside the window, echoed loudly in his head. Strange images appeared in his head, flashes of alien faces, strange places, unfamiliar sounds. Alexei could not understand what was happening. Trying to figure it out, he returned to the lab and began to analyze his own memory as if it were another experiment. Suddenly, an image emerged from the depths of his consciousness, an old mental hospital that he had once explored where forbidden experiments were conducted. He was sure that he had never been there, but these images seemed real, like memories that had been hidden for a long time. After a few days, Alexei began to notice that his memory was changing. Simple things were disappearing, the names of familiar people, events from the recent past. But instead, new memories were appearing. Memories of the hospital, of the strange creatures that lived there. Memories of how he himself was a patient in this hospital. With each passing day, reality became more and more blurred. Alexei could no longer distinguish his true memories from the false ones. Who was he? How did he get here? These questions tormented his mind until one night he received an answer. That night, Alexei woke up in a cold sweat, his heart pounding wildly. He dreamed that he was lying in a ward of that very hospital, tied to a bed, and doctors with distorted faces were moving around him. Their faces resembled human ones, but something was wrong. Their eyes were too black, and their movements were too abrupt. One of them leaned over him, smiling, but it was not a human smile. It was something else, something that made Alexei scream and wake up in his house. But was it a dream? Having gotten used to the strangeness of his new memories, he decided to return to the lab to check them, as he always did with any changes in his mind. However, when he left the house, he saw that the street around him had changed. This was not his home place. He was standing in the middle of a dark, gloomy courtyard of an old abandoned building, and this building was the hospital from his dream. Realizing that the reality around him had changed, Alexei realized he had never been free. The hospital was always with him. It did not let him go. All these years, everything he had done, it was just part of an experiment that had not ended. Now his mind belonged entirely to this hospital. He remembered everything. He was a patient who had never left the walls of this terrible place. The image appeared in his head again. He was sitting on a dirty metal bed, surrounded by white walls with rusty spots. In the corner of the room, a quiet whisper, and then footsteps. The footsteps of those very creatures that once seemed like just a part of his nightmares. But it was not a dream. The hospital had swallowed him, and he would never be able to get out. Or maybe he didn't want to. After all, the reality outside no longer existed for him. All that was left was the hospital, the monsters in his own madness.